Hi, in this video I'm showing you the game between Fabiano Caruana and Wesley from the playoff of US Championship, and this was the first game which was played. By the way, they had a three-way tie: Caruana, Wesley, and Samuel Savian. So in the first round, Caruana and played their game. The opening was English opening. We had something similar to reverse Sicilian with 4 knights out, and here Fabi chose this variation with e4. I believe that was some kind of preparation for the match with Magnus in 2018. So something was left off and he tried to use it in this match. And Wesley brought back his bishop to c5, and now white expands on the queen side with b4 and tries to neutralize this bishop on b6 by exchanging those bishops. Black castles, and after some moves, white has a damaged pawn structure, slightly damaged pawn structure, but on the other hand, he doesn't allow black to gain any counterplay on the king side, because f4 is covered nicely by white, and even if black's knight gets to g6, it's hard to generate any counterplay further. So he goes knight g6, but mainly to stop knight h4 for white, after which he would maybe go to f5 and create some play even on the king side. So knight g6 is more like prophylactic move than anything else. White goes queen d2, and now rook e8, trying to stabilize the position in the center, so if d4 comes, that he's going to hold this, and also to eventually put pressure on e3, on e4 if necessary. White goes rook a1, trying to support the e-pawn, and now black is trying to break the pawn structure on the queen side. But now Fabiano just advances with b5, and now black continues this breakthrough with c6. And here white goes bishop d1, trying to improve his bishop. Black goes h6, and now he plays d4. Because now if e takes d4, after e takes d4, the e4 pawn is protected. That's the reason why white played bishop d1. Now black holds the center with queen e7, and also steps away from the d file, which might become dangerous. Bishop c2, and now bishop d7, trying to force some exchanges on the queen side, which would make his pieces more free on the queen side. And now I think that white made a very committal move and slightly inaccurate, because with d5 now he's weakening c5 square, and it allows black to get a good play on the queen side. I think it was better just to keep the tension on the queen side and play a move like rook b1, after which he would capture on c6, and also connecting that with a slightly weakened pawn on a5, it would give white good chances to break through on the queen side. But instead he played d5, trying to provoke, trying to gain some space in the center, and also to provoke black to exchange. And maybe his idea was to somehow get knight a4, knight b6, but I think that it's not as good as Fabi thought. So black took on b5, cb, and now rook ec8. White prepares rook c1 and also knight a4, because he wants to defend b5 before he goes to a4 with his knight. And now black goes with a4. Here, one possible plan was to go queen d8. And if white tries knight a4, then to bring bishop back. And now to try to get his knight from d7 to c5 to parry this knight on a4. When he exchanges these knights, he will have a good contest for the c file. And I think he would not have many problems in this position. Instead, he wanted to destabilize the b5 pawn with a4, which is also quite fine. Here he plays queen b2, trying to get his queen on the queen side, and also to, at some moment, play queen b4, if not immediately. Black goes queen d8, so when Fabi plays queen b4, he plays queen a5. What happened in the game, actually? They exchange queens, and now rook c1. And now we have a slightly disbalanced position. White's pawn on b5 is weak, but also the c file seems like it's getting out of control for black. So there is that disbalance in the position. He goes back, and now knight goes to a4. Knight g4 attacking the pawn, and now rook fe1. And now white is not scared of getting rooks exchanged and taking on e3. For example, if this happens, then also this knight looks very, very loose, because if I play h3, or simply I go rook c7 and I attack the b7 pawn and the bishop, it looks like white has plenty of counterplay for the sacrificed pawn, for the lost pawn. And also, at some moment he can play h3, and this knight doesn't have an escape route, which is very important. Instead, he plays king f8, trying to activate his king. And now knight b4 is coming. And now black plays king e8. Also, it was possible to play rook c1 to exchange and offer another exchange, because let's show one variation. For example, if they exchange and go bishop c2, which wins the a4 pawn, now black can take on e3, and after white captures on a4, then he can attack on a3 also. And if white defends with knight c2, black will just play bishop d7, and now the threat is knight b6. After which bishop has to go away, and the b5 pawn is lost. So that seemed like a good idea, good plan for black to exchange all the heavy pieces and to put some pressure on b5 in the end. But instead he played king e8, and after h6 he went back, knight d2, going for c4 and b6 later on, and now black plays king e7. Again, it was good to play rook c1, and now king d8. And if white tries knight c4, then you can defend it by knight e8, and if knight b6 goes, it looks scary, but now black has a counterplay against the b5 pawn, which will very soon be lost. So instead he plays king e7, and now he allows very unpleasant play for white. He plays knight c4, logically, and now after rook c5, knight b6 comes. And you'll see very soon the point of white's whole plan. After rook a5, it seems like b5 pawn is lost very soon. But now white has a really nice combination. He took on c5, and after black takes, knight c6 is very nice. And after bc, which is forced, bc, and now the bishop, black is temporarily a piece up, but he cannot really save the bishop, because if he goes to e8, which is the only reasonable square if you want to keep the bishop, now the c pawn is just winning on the next move, and material losses are just terrible for black. Also, here you can play d6. That's even stronger than c7. So after bc6, black was pretty much forced to give up the material immediately with bishop c6, and after dc, the c-pawn seems both weak and strong. White has to play energetically if he wants to use this c-pawn, because if black stabilizes in this position, the c-pawn becomes a liability, and black's c-pawn will become a very strong asset in the future. So black tries to block the c-pawn by playing king d8, because king d6 is impossible because of the fork on c4. Knight c4 would just capture the rook, so he has to go the other way, king d8. And now white plays knight d5, which is a mistake in this position, and after this move, black more or less becomes solid and manages to block the pawns. Instead, he should have played rook b1, and the point is, if black tries to block the pawn, now white has knight d5, and here, if he captures, then you have these two pawns which are very strong, and also rook b7 is a strong threat. And you might enter even the rook ending with bishop g6 and just push e4. For example, if you defend with rook a7, you can take and go e4. You have two connected passed pawns, and when the king gets closer, he will take control over the c-pawn, which is basically the only counterplay which black has in this position. So after knight d5, black shouldn't capture. He should play this, but still, the position is so bad for black, because after rook b6, king d7, bishop b5, king c8, now he can simply take on f6 and go bishop c4. And now those two pawns on f6 and f7 are very weak, and eventually they'll drop. The plan is next. King goes closer to the c-pawn, so the c-pawn doesn't run, and after you capture these pawns, it's just a matter of time when white will realize his advantage. Instead, he played knight d5. Caruana played knight d5, and after taking and ed, now black is slowly consolidating his position with knight e7. The plan is to go to c8 and to d6 to finally block these pawns and to put his king on c7 if necessary. And now white plays king f2. I think it was better just to activate his rook with rook b8, because after king c7 he has rook f8, and I think here after c4 he has to be satisfied with the draw. For example, if he takes on c4 and black takes back, rook f7, it looks to me that white is having a draw here, because if you go to b6, then rook b7 comes, and after king c5, c7 is going to be pushed, and after knight d6, which is the only move, then you can go rook b8 and you will eventually get back your knight. And this ending looks pretty drawish, in my opinion. After king f2, I think that white is forced to a passive defense. And now black plays c4, bishop c2, and now f5 is played, trying to completely undermine white's center by taking out the e4 pawn, and also d5 and c6. White goes king e3 and now king c7, completely blocking the queen side and also stopping rook b8 ideas, which don't exist anymore because the king is on c7. So white plays rook b4, attacking the a4 pawn, and now the e4 pawn is gone. Bishop e4, and let's mention, I forgot to mention this, that Caruana was already in time trouble and he was on less than 1 minute, I think. So you can understand why he played moves he played, it's not easy to play in the tight knot, in the time trouble. So black plays c3 here, and here was the last chance to salvage the game. White played bishop c2 in this position, and he should have just blocked the pawn by playing king d3, and after rook c5 to get in front of this pawn by king c2, and if knight e4 happens, which I think is the only way to break this barrier, because d5 c6 construction is not going to be disrupted if the bishop is still there. So I think that this is the only way to make some advance. Rook e4, and now if rook takes d5, then you take on c3, and after king c6, white takes on a4, and this position is also a draw because you have an a pawn and black has an e pawn, and it should be a draw. But instead, in the time trouble, white plays bishop c2, and now the d5 pawn is lost after rook a4, which was played. Black played rook d2, and in this position, Fabiano lost on time. But this position is already very, very tough, because let's show one variation. If white goes bishop g6, then he would lose the g2 pawn, and after the bishop goes back to h7 or b1, then black would simply play c2, and he would promote his pawn or just take the bishop. Also, if he goes to e4, then black would capture on e4, and after rook e4, then black has this nice move, rook d4. White cannot exchange rooks, because he would just get, black would just get two passed pawns, and black would capture on c6, and eventually that a pawn, which is on a3. So in this position, the only way to continue is rook e5, but after rook c4, the c pawn is just going to run, and the most white can only give up the rook for the pawn, or to take black's rook in exchange for black promoting. For example, if king d3, then you push, and if king c4, promotion is happening, and this will be an easy win for black. This was the first round of playoff, which brought Caruana in the tough spot, and he needs a win versus Fabiano, which you will see in the next video. Thank you very much, and see you later. Bye.